Hi friends, Krista here. Thanks for stopping by Books and Jams. Today we're going to be talking about the books that I read in the month of August, at the end of the month of August, or sprinkled in the middle of Catch-Up-a-thon. I already filmed a video and posted it, which was my Catch-Up-a-thon wrap-up, which included the 4 books that I read for that and the many that I unhauled or DNF'd during that time. So if you're interested in those Book of the Month books that I read in August, go ahead and check out that video. It's linked in the description down below. But I had quite a few other books, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7-ish. I had 7 other books that I read in the month of August as well. About half of those were for some sort of buddy read or group read. So I'm gonna talk about those with you. The first one is Hinds Feet on High Places by Hannah Hurnard. I enjoyed this Christian allegory book so much, and I do have 3 different live conversations with other booktubers that are on my channel already, where we go through this book section by section and talk about our thoughts and feelings and response as we were reading the book. So I would highly recommend you checking those out if you're interested in reading this, or if you read it and you want to feel like you're participating in the group read along after the fact. That's totally fine with me. I will just say that I absolutely loved the journey of Much Afraid in this story. She is very afraid at the beginning and questions everything about the shepherd and life, and she's lame and has a lot of insecurities and fears, and has a spark of bravery though, and follows the shepherd's call to the high places, and along the way is partnered with sorrow and suffering, and they have to struggle along the way with different kind of obstacles and mountains and cliffs and the lake of loneliness, and everything it's similar to Pilgrim's Progress in the way that everything is named for what it represents. So there's no questioning the allegory. It's very in your face. However, this was a beautiful, introspective, and challenging look at my own spiritual journey and the things that I have questioned the Lord about, and the reminders that the shepherd gave to Much Afraid along the way, I could take as reminders for my own life. This is not scripture, but there's a lot of scripture in here, which I really appreciated as well. I just thought that this was a really good journey. It was a very meaningful read, and I'm so thankful to those wonderful ladies who joined me in reading this and talking about it on my channel. So glad that I read it. And if you have a chance to read it in this edition, I highly recommend it. There's just some beautiful full color illustrations, as well as photographs in there and journal pages and questions to think about. There's also at the back some blank coloring pages that you could do as part of your devotional time. And this copy also has a bit of a memoir of Hannah Hurnard going to the Swiss Alps and lessons that she learned in her own high places. So it's just a beautiful edition, and I would highly, highly recommend reading this book. In August, my Patreon book club book was Skyward by Brandon Sanderson. I didn't think about the fact that we had just recently done Tress of the Emerald Sea, which was by him as well, and then we did Skyward. So sorry to those of you who don't usually read fantasy or sci-fi that are part of my Patreon. We don't always go that route. But I give options in my poll every month, and this is what got picked for August. And I'm not sad about it. This is a young adult sci-fi novel. We follow Spencer, who really has this dream, this huge dream to become a pilot. Her father was a pilot and went up to fight one day, and in the course of that battle was branded a coward. And Spencer and her family were kind of looked down upon because bravery and courage is a value of this community on this planet where Spencer lives. So she is determined to prove to everybody that she is not a coward, and that she doesn't believe her dad was either. She works her way to try to get into flight school. Once there, she's paired up with about 10 other students, and you do really get to see their interactions together with her instructor. And Spencer has spent a lot of time roaming the caves on this planet where she lives, and one day discovers a piece of machinery that she is determined to get working again. It was a fun read, a compulsive read. Once I got into it, it took me a little minute to get into it at the beginning, but once I was into it, I was definitely into it. I really liked the characters in here and how nuanced they were. Like, they were not all good or all bad. They all had some flaws, Spencer herself included, and their instructor and the other members of her flight class. And yet, I just kind of cared about them by the end. I was rooting for them. I could do with fewer battle scenes. However, I do think that Sanderson did a good job of explaining things and not getting too deep into it where it was super confusing. In my mind, when I see like all the battle scenes here are taking place in outer space, but in my mind, they're like miniatures, pew pew, like flying around. I don't always do a good job of imagining what those battles are like, but I do think he does a decent job of explaining them. Just in my mind, they're little. Like I'm seeing it on a screen and they're little. I don't know. But I do think this had a lot of good discussion points. I think there was a lot of character growth in our main character, Spensa, and I'm definitely very interested in continuing the series. I do have Starsight, which is book 2 on my series September TBR. I'm hoping to dive right into the next one. And if it tells you anything, my mom read this for our Patreon book club, and she's already finished the second one, and she can't wait for me to finish it so we can talk about it. So she dove right into the next one as well because she loved it. And this is definitely not her normal cup of tea. So I'm so glad that we read this and that I read it. I'm eager to continue. The third book that was for a group read in August was The Castle of Tangled Magic by Sophie Anderson. This was our middle grade March book club book. We're doing quarterly books this year, and we met in August and talked about The Castle of Tangled Magic. Unfortunately, this one wasn't a big hit for any of us. It was kind of a middle of the road book. Like it was a fun story, but it didn't hit on an emotional level. It didn't draw us in with a captivating story. It was just middle of the road. It was okay. There were some highlights to it. There were some positive points, but ultimately it just felt kind of meh across the board for me. Is meh even a word? I don't know. There were things that just felt a little too convenient, which I don't always mind in a middle grade book. I think it was the emotional lack that kept me from liking this book more. I wanted the characters to have a little more depth. I wanted to know a little bit more about the story. It felt like we jumped right in and we're diving through without any kind of explanation. I just missed out on that. As much as I love the cover and the spine, I don't think I'm going to be keeping this one on my shelves, but I'm not sure I'm done with Sophie Anderson yet. I do have The Girl Who Speaks Bear on my shelves, and I still want to read that one. I enjoyed The House with Chicken Legs more than this one, and I do love the tie-in at the end between those two stories. So that was pretty fun. I completed a few other books. The one that I was supposed to do it kind of as a group read with some of my patrons, but we never ended up getting together to talk about it. But I did finish The Shell Seekers by Rosamund Pilcher, and this was such a cozy, wonderful read. I really enjoyed this, and I forget how much I enjoyed Winter Solstice as well by her. I think she just tells a good story. If somebody tells me a book is family drama, usually for me, that's kind of an anti-buzzword. But this book definitely was filled with some family drama. We have these 3 siblings, and the mom is just struggling with some health things, and we see the different ways that the children respond to it. Her 3 grown children are awful. They're the worst. I feel so bad for this lady because she loves her kids, but they drive her up a wall. This book is all revolves around a painting called The Shell Seekers, which is hanging in mom's house. And all of a sudden, the painter of the painting, who happens to be the mom's dad, so the kid's grandfather, his work starts selling for lots and lots of money. And we see the ways that these 3 kids try to get mom to sell grandpa's stuff. They're just greedy. They think that if she sells it, they're going to get their hands on the money. Like, it's just family drama to a T, but it was cozy. It was delightful. I really enjoyed the way Rosamund Pilcher painted the picture of this family and this storyline. I was just in it. It's not a very fast-paced book. It's not super propulsive as you're reading through. I just was invested in this family. It's like deep into this family, and I was in it. It was interesting structure. Each of the super long chapters was focused on a different character in the family, both family members and outside of the family. So the story moves along, but each chapter we're kind of seeing and learning a little bit more about the person who's at the heading of the chapter. And we learn a little bit more about how they're connected to this main storyline as the story's moving forward. I thought the structure of it was really interesting, and I'm so glad that I read it, and it will not be my last Rosamund Pilcher. The last few that I have, I read two of them on my way up to New York to my mom's house. And on the way home, I read a different one that I will include in my September wrap up. But on the way up north towards the end of the month, I had started the audiobook of The Murder of Mr Wickham by Claudia Gray. I did talk about this in my vlog a little bit. It is a murder mystery at Emma Knightley's house. Emma and Mr. Knightley's house. They host a house party and invite all of these other characters from different Jane Austen novels. At this house party, Wickham shows up. He is a trickster and manipulative as always, as he is in Pride and Prejudice. And you kind of learn that each of these different characters have some dealings with Wickham where they have lost money or he has twisted things. Like, he's just the worst. Well, Wickham ends up dead, and Jonathan Darcy, Lizzie and Mr. Darcy's son, and Juliet Tilney, Catherine Morland's daughter, they are determined to try to solve the mystery. I really enjoyed this. It felt very cozy. It was delightful to see how all of these characters might have worked together in the same, if they were contemporaries of each other. I thought that Claudia Gray did a good job of keeping the personality of the different characters from Jane Austen's work into this one. Like, how they were in Jane Austen's work was very similar in here. Fanny Price was still a very devout, ended up in the chapel praying all the time. Emma was still a little bit like she had backed off on her matchmaker ways, but looking at Juliet and Jonathan trying to solve the mystery, she's like, I really enjoyed this story. I thought it was a lot of fun. This is the start of a series, so I will probably continue with the next one. Yeah, I really enjoyed it. And then I had just a couple hours left, so I was able to find a middle grade that would fit the time that I had left. And so I read The Lost Library by Rebecca Stead and Wendy Mass. I was thinking was a fantasy, and a Little Free Library was a portal into the fantasy world. It's not exactly what this was, but there are some paranormal aspects, as you can probably imagine from what you see down here. There's a little bit of a paranormal aspect, but there used to be a library in this town, and these books that in this Little Free Library that just shows up one day all came from that past library. All the library cards are still in there. And this kid, the book that he picked out to bring home, the two books that he picked out to bring home were both checked out by his dad, and everything that's in the Little Free Library was returned on the same day. So there's kind of mystery of what's going on. Where did all these books come from? What's up with the cat? But I loved the love of books. I loved the family of the main kid that's in here. I don't think that anything was developed very far. Has a favorite author, and he actually sends a note to that author at one point based on something that he read in one of these books. And so like there's the author and the books and the love of reading, like it's all intertwined in this story, and also like what happened to this library and where did this Little Free Library come from. So I really enjoyed it. It wasn't my favorite. It did feel kind of middle of the road. I ended up giving it 3 stars. It was a quick read, but again, it was just felt very surface level to me. And I think it's the same type of situation as the Castle of Tangled Magic. Like, there was no emotional connection for me. And I think I need that, even in my middle grade. I just didn't feel pulled in or care very much about the characters. Even though I could enjoy what was going on, I didn't care. And because it was a little different from what I was expecting, that also was a little bit of a downer for me. I just kept waiting for something else to happen, and it just wasn't going in that direction at all. So it was okay, but not great. I mean, I wouldn't not recommend it, but just know what you're getting into. And then finally, another book that I finished technically in September, but because it's a library book, I'm going to go ahead and talk about it now. Mind Games by Nora Roberts was my Patreon pick for August. And I'm glad, because I never would have picked this book up. And it's not one actually that I would totally recommend to other people, but it was a very compelling and interesting read. So in the very beginning, we follow these 2 kids, a 12-year-old and a 10-year-old, who are headed out to their granny's house. They live in Virginia, and she lives in the Appalachian Mountains in Kentucky, where their mother grew up. You kind of get a feel for this loving family. They're so excited to go out to granny's house. They love the 2 weeks they get to spend out there every summer. While they are out there, the daughter has almost like a dream where she's inside the mind of a murderer, and he goes into their house and kills their parents. And that mind connection carries on for decades. She's able to talk to the police and give a description of him because she was in his mind. She saw it all happen. Mind you, she's 12 years old. So it was brutal, traumatic thing for her to experience. Granny teaches her that all of the women in their family have this kind of psychic ability. Hers is super strong. But she teaches her how to protect herself and to close her mind off, like when she's sleeping and things. So she can protect her mind a little bit, because now this guy who's a psychopath has the ability to talk to this girl as well. So he just, he's the worst, and she's trying to get him out of her head. And as they get older, this connection continues. It's not like an everyday kind of a thing, but she starts to get headaches whenever he's trying to push into her mind. This whole psychic thing that is just bizarre. But the story itself was very compelling. I was invested. Once I got into it, I just wanted to read and find out what was going to happen. So really good storytelling. Strange story, but really good storytelling. And I didn't love all the language. There's a lot of language. But yeah, just interesting. I liked the life out in the Appalachians, out in Kentucky, the milking the goats and the cow and making soap. And I loved the kids and their bond with each other and with their grandmother. The parents had planned well ahead, because his parents are out of the picture and in California and never approved of him marrying the mom. So they're out of the picture, but Granny raised the kids on her own, whatever. So there were aspects of it that I really liked. The family aspect, the bond between them, the lifestyle out in Kentucky, and the storytelling for sure. So that's it. Outside of the book of the month books that I read at the beginning of the month, these are the books that I finished in the month of August. So what is that? 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11. Not too bad. 11 books. I'm really happy with some of the ones that I read. Some were kind of just okay. The middle grade for me was just okay this month. But yeah, some really interesting, a wide variety there. We've got allegory, science fiction with mind games, what you call psychic stuff, like bizarre, fantasy, middle grade, murder mystery, like a cozy contemporary kind of book. Yeah, a lot of variety there. It was a great reading month. I would love to hear from you. What was some of your favorite reads in the month of August? Have you read any of these? Are any of them going on your TBR or coming off of your TBR? I'd love to know. Let's chat in the comments down below. Thank you so much for spending some time with me today. I really appreciate you being here and taking a few minutes of your day to hang out with me. And I look forward to talking with you in another video very soon. Bye.